Welcome to the Save Childhood podcast with Jennifer McCarville. Because childhood has changed, but children have not.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Save Childhood podcast.
I'm Jennifer McCarville.
And I'm Nicole Dugan, and we are happy to be here with you today. And we are going to be talking about one of the problems in our schools in America today. And because they're kind of a mess. Our educational system in America is a mess. And there are many reasons for that. Mm-hmm. And we could talk to you all day long about them, but we wanted to just focus on one today, and that is the push down of academics and the word academics.
Yeah, even like what it means. And really, I think there's a phenomenon about parents being mesmerized with academics. I want my child to go to an academic school. I want my child to go to an academically rigorous education, to get an academically rigorous education. We're looking at all the charter schools and we're going to go to that one because they're academically rigorous.
Yeah.
And what is, and what is academics?
Well, and I even remember with my first child, when we were looking for a daycare, when we thought we were going to enroll him in daycare, I too was fed the dishonesty of the academic rigor, even in a daycare setting. I didn't know any better.
Right. Of course you don't know any better.
Yeah.
And that's one of my biggest frustrations. And it actually on the verge of infuriating that so many people who have the privilege of working with children, teaching children, caring for children, they are misinforming parents in order to make a living. They're trying to get parents to enroll in whichever program they're offering. And instead of being honest with them about what children need and delivering that for children, they say things that mislead parents in order to impress them, which just feeds ego. Like, well, my child's going to be able to read when they do this, and they're learning the alphabet, and here they. And there's a difference between that and the children as they naturally learn and grow, and how beautiful that is, and really being able to celebrate those learning milestones. This is very different from that. This is they're feeding into parents needing to feel like my child is having this push down academics and that makes them better, smarter, is going to serve them well longer. And those things are absolutely untrue.
Right. And let's just assume that the people that are working with children haven't learned this information yet. They're not intentionally feeding us lies, I have to assume.
I absolutely agree with you sometimes.
Okay. But
because I also believe if you are going to be working with children, you have an obligation to know what they need.
Right.
Not to assume what's going to make parents happy or what can I make them do. We can make children do a whole lot of things.
Sure.
But that doesn't honor their development. So and honestly, you know why? It's easier. It is easier to set 3-year-olds down and have them color a worksheet than it is to create a rich, engaging environment that they can touch things as much as they want to, they can interact with genuinely, they can have their own ideas and you can help them implement them. You feel more in control, and it is much easier to give children worksheets and inappropriate things to prove that they're learning something.
Yeah, and many of them are just doing what they were taught to do in college. Mm-hmm. So yeah, what we're here today to do is share the message that is an important one that could change educational problems if people would know the research and know the information.
Well, and what we do know from all of our years educating parents and walking alongside them and being honest with them and explaining to them how children learn is that parents often, more times than not, but they're relieved to realize, oh my gosh, I don't have to stress my child out like that.
Right.
I don't have to keep doing this. I mean, we have a family that came to the school, and before that, they were in a school where they were having play dates. The child was a toddler, 2 years old, and the other parents in the play date group were pulling flashcards out to quiz their 2-year-olds in front of everyone else. What's the purpose there? I assume that in that scenario, the purpose is to show everyone how much your child knows because you've trained them on flashcards. And again, conversation for a different time, but the right side of the brain has hold in children through age 8, and that is the side that holds pictures. So yes, you can get children to regurgitate a lot of things that they see because they can associate with pictures very easily. That is not authentic learning. That is not necessarily learning that's going to stick. And it also is robbing them of so many other things that they should be doing in those early years. And by early years, we mean through 8 years old and even beyond that, because learning best comes through experiences and real engaging activities.
Yeah, I think flashcards have no role in the education of a child.
I know.
Until they're maybe in high school.
Possibly.
And learning on their own. Maybe. That's
Maybe.
my opinion based in no research.
Well, what do you think about flashcards for multiplication?
Oh, well, yeah, I guess those are okay.
I do think that's an outlier for
right.
multiplication in about 3rd grade. I
Yeah.
do think that at that point, but of course we're talking about having given children the opportunity to develop a really solid understanding of mathematical thinking and an ability to exercise mathematical thinking.
Yeah, and even just a deep understanding of the concept of multiplication before the flashcards are helping them recall it quicker.
Oh, absolutely. So that's about,
okay.
Just because you want them to have quick recall.
Yeah.
And that is memorization.
And that's the time to do it.
Yes.
But not before that.
Not before that. And I think with multiplication, after they understand the concepts of grouping and addition and the foundations of multiplication, and that it's basically fast addition.
Yeah.
And then they are memorizing those facts. They're not doing flashcards because they're learning something new,
right.
or doing flashcards because that's the best way to teach.
Right. Okay, so let's go back and talk about, if we're going to fix this problem, what do we need to understand about the definition of academic? What did they mean a long time ago, and what do they mean to us today?
So, yeah, and the word academic comes from the word academia, which meant a formal place that you went to study. Okay. And where there was instruction from someone wise, someone with life experience, someone who could instruct you in the ways of philosophy, life, learning. But today, that term is very different, and it not only tends to imply formal reading, math, writing, science lessons, etc. It implies that for sure, but it also implies that there is an assessment with that to prove children have learned, and none of it aligns with the natural developmental trajectory of child growth. None of it is about that. So it really, when someone's talking about an academic school, they're saying we are going to expect children to sit longer, to listen to direct instruction, to regurgitate information, and then to prove it on paper. And children 8 and younger should not be doing that.
Yeah. Right.
I mean, period, plain and simple. And I think that once parents can understand that, and educators too, those of us who are educators, if you're in a classroom with children 8 and younger and you are pushing this on them, you will feel the pushback. And the children naturally, because it is hard for them, and not because they're not brilliant, they are. Mm-hmm. It is hard for them because it goes against the very way they're designed.
Right.
So also, when schooling began in our country, children didn't go younger than 8 years old.
Right.
And that was actually a good thing that they did then.
Right.
But really, the brain research tells us again and again, and also our own personal experiences support the brain research, actually, is that children by the age of 7, that's when they are beginning to be ready for formal instruction. And that doesn't mean, and here's the big thing, for some reason, it's one extreme or the other in people's minds. We have academics and children are going to learn reading and writing, etc. Or we're not an academically focused school, and that means they're learning nothing. They're doing nothing. Their brains are just going to be jello, and they're not going to learn a thing. And that could not be further from the truth. So even the fact that it is a black or white issue that you go to an academic school or you don't is ludicrous.
Right.
I mean, right there, that's a conversation that needs to change, a mindset that needs to be obliterated right away.
Right. The fact that we honor the development at our school and honor the way children are made doesn't mean
they're not learning.
They're not learning, and it doesn't mean there aren't academics.
Right.
Especially with the older
Right. Yeah. But now, like in this modern day educational system, which, as you mentioned, it's a problem.
Yeah.
We tend to associate academics only as being a way of learning.
Right. And if they're not sitting down to do that and prove it on paper, then they're not learning.
Then they're not learning.
True. Yeah.
Yeah. And part of that is also adults in our society, we want to see the proof of whatever. We want to see the proof of learning. And so that's another way that different entities have worked to impress parents is they're paying for their child to be away from them all day to go into childcare a lot of times. And the parents want to know what they're paying for.
Right.
And instead of helping parents understand what they are getting when children are able to play and have their own experiences, etc., it's easier and it makes parents feel better to say, here's a worksheet to show you what they learned today. But that's not learning.
Right. And also it's frustrating too, the way that our system has put a very straight line about what children should be doing and when. And then what about the children that aren't ready for those inappropriate measures? How does that make them feel?
Right.
Right.
Right. And also I think that's something to pay attention to all on many levels, because people are ready to learn things in different times and with different circumstances. And just because another child can tolerate the sitting still or enjoys the worksheet type work doesn't mean that they're learning better or learning more than a child who isn't.
Right.
And in order to really be able to discern those things, we've got to understand how children grow and learn.
Right. And if we're pushing it down so early, even into the toddler and preschool years, they're not having the chance to develop important things in their brain, like.
Right. Well, their brain needs to be able to develop a little more executive function. I mean, neuroscience is very clear. You have to have some cognitive flexibility. You have to be able to memorize and have a long enough attention span in order to really focus on true academic learning. And if we're going to say true academic learning is about direct instruction, sitting still, listening, learning, regurgitating, and when you're older, you can retain that if you're interested. You still have to be interested. That's why so many people can take a test and never remember what they learned. And that's how we get through our educational system.
Yeah.
A lot of times, a lot of us, we're just like, I couldn't tell you much about that topic. I had to take it, but I passed all my tests and I made decent grades, right? And so that's what we have to do sometimes in that, high school. Let's talk about doing it in high school.
Right.
I mean, that's when I can get behind the formal modern day definition of academics, which is direct instruction, regurgitating and memorizing information, and being assessed and tested on it.
Right.
High school, college. But all the years before, doing it earlier isn't better.
Right.
And in fact, it's truly, truly against development, when what that means is the cost is high for children because they end up not liking learning. They end up not believing in themselves as learners, and they end up not having the foundation of development that their brain needs in order to build academics on.
Right.
And, those are just the bottom lines. Children's brains are still constructing the ability to learn academically.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think that's not something that we should expect children to do before high school.
Right. Yeah.
So
let's flip the switch here. And in our early childhood program, we spent a lot of time educating the parents about the learning that's happening behind the everyday experiences.
Right.
And so can you give us a few examples of what they're learning while they're playing and socializing and experiencing nature?
Absolutely. And so children who are building with blocks, of course, there are so many mathematical concepts, algebraic concepts included in those mathematical concepts, mathematical thinking, engineering, all of these things that we have to learn to trust the process of experiences and growing and development, because those outcomes can take years to see.
Mm-hmm.
There is research that it's very profound implications of children having plenty of time to build with unit blocks when they're younger, and the outcomes show up in middle school. And it's really hard for people to wait that long. And
Right.
I talk about that a lot. That is one piece of research I bring up a lot because it is just such a good illustration of the long game of learning. And it's like that with everything else. So as we're listening to children and talking to children and, writing down their stories and reading to children and singing with children, they're building such a beautiful, solid, necessary foundation for language arts, academics, learning formal English, and later in life. But if we skip all of those experiences, they have a very shallow education overall.
Right.
And so, when they're having opportunities to mix things like, shaving cream and food coloring and baking soda and vinegar and salt and all these everyday things, they're learning about science. They're learning about how things interact, and they're learning to guess what's going to happen and then test it and then find out if what they thought was going to happen was real. So they're learning the scientific process, and, they need years of doing this. We are such a speed hungry society. We want to say, okay, we did that for a month when they were in kindergarten, and so they now know all of that.
Right.
And I
have proof on this paper.
Right. Yeah. And then, in 3 months, it's like, but I have the paper. How come you don't know this? How come you don't understand it? Because they never really learned it.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said before, we can get children to do a whole lot of things. We can. And that's the easy way. I've done that.
Mm-hmm. I have too.
Yeah. And they can do it. But it's not learning. So I think we have to really, as always, think about what are our goals in educating children, and why are we even here, and why as parents is this important? And if it's important because you want your child to be a lifelong learner, because you want them to have a deep intellect, because you want them to have grit, because you want them to, tackle new problems and try new things, then you have to understand how they learn, and you have to protect it and advocate for it and find joy in giving it to them, rather than a temporary satisfaction for whatever reason we get from, pridefully sharing our children's accomplishments. We have to really think about why that would be important if our goal is for them to be lifelong learners and have a real lasting education.
Right.
So, but these brains, they're just still under construction. And Dr. Jane Healy, if you haven't read any of her work, you really should. But her research on brain development, there's a quote here that she says, pushing young children into academics before they are developmentally ready can cause frustration, failure, and a dislike of learning. There you go. It's just all wrapped up right there in the brain science.
Right.
And so it's something that's not worth the cost. Everything has a cost. And, understanding what academics are and that they have a place and that we're not anti-academic, but how do you define academics? And, we easily define academic learning here in language and literacy as singing and being read to and playing with sounds and learning how to rhyme and enjoying the banter of language and making story dictations. And eventually those things fall together and children are happy and they're secure and they do begin to read. And there is some instruction that goes with that as well.
Sure.
But it's definitely not something we're expecting them to prove, in ways that would compromise that development.
Right. And I can't even tell you the amount of times where we're looking at the children's progress and growth, and one of the children may not be performing where the other children are,
Mm-hmm.
and in amongst their peers.
Sure.
And we look at it and we talk about it and we talk about their age, their chronological age, and then we say, you know what? They're showing growth in this area, they're showing growth in this area. Let's not be alarmed.
Right.
Let's trust the process and just give them some more time and experiences and see. And I can't tell you the number of times where that has worked out and shown to be true.
Every time.
Yep. I mean, there are some
There are
times where there were some learning challenges that needed to be identified.
And
where
those weren't the
maybe-
times that we were saying, let's give them space.
Right, no.
When that's the case, there is a difference between that, right? But so every time, and the other thing is, even in that area where they're not showing the same amount of growth, they have shown growth over time.
True.
They're just they're just melding in that area. And that's normal. It's normal for us to learn new things and to savor them and let them meld and simmer and practice them and let our brains really continue at the same level, absorbing the information, the skill, etc., before it takes a leap of learning again.
You're right.
And so that's what you're talking about is, we can see they're continuing maybe in math concepts, they're making this progress, but they've kind of, in the area of phonetic awareness, or I don't know, that's, they're just kind of not going to the next step. Like they know all of the sounds of the letters of the alphabet, but yet they're just not able to do CVC words yet, which are consonant vowel consonant words, which are one of the first things that children will read. But we know they have the sounds, so why aren't they reading these words? Well, let's not panic yet.
Mm-hmm.
Let's wait and see, because it could just be that their brains are focusing on something else for a little while.
Right.
And we're so like that no matter our age.
Right.
I mean, who are we kidding? When we think about it, we number one, what we also know from all this amazing brain research we have is there's really no such thing as multitasking. There really isn't. I mean, you can't do two things equally well at the same time. And so with that same kind of concept, we need to learn one thing, and we're still sprinkling in and learning the other things. But if we're going to go deeper, we've got to really let it meld for a little while.
Right. I think that parents and educators too probably feel like that all the time. Like they're not doing what we're expecting them to do. What are we going to do? There's a problem. There's a deficit. Let's pull for some extra interventions. But time again, and with all the things I've learned from you and to trust the process, it has shown to be true.
Right.
That they even out.
Right. That
they all get to where they need to be at their own pace.
And that's where I will consistently say, it's not a personal belief that we're implementing here per se, as it is a deep trust and value in the process of learning and in what the research is proving we see. Because like you said, when at the end you'll say to me, like, you know what? They're all starting to level out. We're getting into the second semester of third grade, and you can really see those academics are all starting to level out. You're still going to have children who love reading more than other children, or enjoy math more than other children. That's always going to happen because they're full people. But they're leveling out at what academically in most ways, like the research says.
Right.
And it's the research. I'm not making this stuff up.
Right.
Like we're trusting the process, and it is not always easy, even for those of us who are so adamant and holding on to it with such, understanding. There are still times where we're going, well, are we sure? Should we? And we are not saying there are not times for evaluations.
Right.
We recommend evaluations, and we share with parents when that time comes. We just want to be sure, because we don't want any child's needs to be missed.
Sure.
So those things don't have to live separately.
Right.
They really don't. And so trusting that process and knowing, and then being able to see it, and for the children to own it and come out on the other side of their own timelines, no matter what that is, but coming out on the other side of that for them to own their learning and still believe in themselves as learners. Such a beautiful thing, because it's true, right?
Yeah.
They're just developing in their own timeline. And that has to be okay for children.
Right. I wonder when the first standardized tests were implemented. I know I'm putting you on the spot, but I just wonder that. I wonder what year that was that we decided to hold all children at the same standard.
At the same standard,
yeah.
Yes. Well, we'll talk about that in another episode soon.
Okay.
So it's a kind of an exciting topic, but yeah, this idea that children should all progress at the same pace, the same time, no matter their birth order, their life circumstances, their likes, their dislikes, their experiences, their chronological age, despite all of that. I mean, it really is an absolutely ludicrous concept when you think about it, right? And then we end up inappropriately, oftentimes, labeling children with having deficits or, differences in learning, delays or deficits that actually they don't have. Now, I am not saying, nobody panic, I am not saying that early intervention for true needs should be avoided. I'm not saying that, but I am saying that we really need to be sure that our expectations align with development.
Right.
Because a developmentally aligned unfolding of learning and growing is not a delay.
Right. And true academic learning in early childhood is the storytelling, the rhythms, the block play, exploring nature, right? Like you said that earlier. That's the academics.
That's the academics.
Right.
That's what academics is. And so it's not that we are doing the direct instruction so much as we are creating the environment to learn and then encouraging, supporting, and walking alongside.
Right. Because we're trusting the process, trusting in their development.
Yeah, we're trusting in their development, but we're also making sure that they have very knowledgeable educators surrounding them, that the environment is enriching and provides them, novelty and experiences to tie words to, and mathematical concepts to tinker with. So later when they have the words and the operations, then they're able to go, oh, I understand that. In a way, I can't even explain it to you sometimes. But it's because they've had so many experiences that build those foundational neuro pathways through those hands-on opportunities.
Yeah. The real learning, the deep real learning.
So then, when they're in kindergarten or in preschool, even when the right time comes for that child, you say, oh, well, when you put those together, you have this many. There's a math word for that. It's called equals. Yeah. And you start saying, oh, that's this plus one. Now you have 2. The math word is equals. Plus means put together, and those things are always happening in our environments here for children younger than 8, younger than 7.
Yeah.
That is academic instruction.
Right. And just because we aren't getting the whole group and sitting them down to teach a certain concept doesn't mean we're not supporting the individual learner who's ready for that concept, who's starting to read on their own. And so you listen to them read, who's really looking at and playing with numbers and letters. That doesn't mean we're not going to walk alongside them in that journey and encourage and support it.
Right.
We're not saying, whoa, too early.
Right. Yeah. No, right. You need to wait just a minute. And that's another thing that we'll get questions about is, they're never going to see letters. I'm like, of course they see letters. Letters are everywhere. Letters are here, and there are different ways with different children, different levels and interests that we meet that interest as it is emerging and unfolding. And it's a beautiful thing. But there are a million different ways that we do that. This is our life's work, and we can't sum everything up in one sentence or with an assessment and tie a bow on it and help people who don't spend their life studying it understand it.
Right.
And there's still so much more for us to learn. So the expectation that education could just be summed up in any one book or one article or one assessment is really misleading. And so of course it's complicated, and there are going to be unknowns for you if this isn't your field of study. We need to be okay with that. Let's be okay with that. And what a beautiful opportunity to enjoy life and the journey of learning. Because at the end of the day, what we're doing when any program, any school does honor the development of children and follows that path is supporting long-term learning. And we're not in a hurry.
Right.
We can't be in a hurry.
So what should parents and educators do?
Right.
What should they do?
Prioritize play.
Okay.
And of course, free play with the right materials, which are open-ended and kid-powered. Lots of time to play. Embrace that. Prioritize the play. Ask the right questions. Right? So you need to ask the right questions. So not the standardized, are they reading kind of questions, but is my child able to develop, are they developing rich language, telling stories, those types of things that aren't about the, assessment or
Mhm.
have they met that milestone necessarily, but are they hearing rich stories? Are they having valuable experiences building and spending time exploring different interactions with materials and creating, painting and using their hands, because the hands engage the brain, and learning what those questions are? I think that's really important. So we're asking the right questions, prioritizing play, standing in those gaps for your children by telling educators, if you're a parent, maybe telling educators who are concerned about it, I understand development, and I'm okay with my child taking their time learning these concepts. I see them growing and learning in these ways, and also that works both ways. As educators saying to parents, this is the process of learning for your child, and I've seen growth in these areas, and in this particular domain, language arts, I've seen growth here, 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 and here, and this is what we're looking for to unfold. And I'm not concerned because I understand development, and this is perfectly appropriate. And there is a spectrum of what's appropriate,
Mhm.
and being okay with that, and reminding one another as we walk alongside parents and educators to nurture these children well, reminding one another to breathe and remember that giving them time is actually better for them.
Right.
So I think that those are really important things. And this is one of the reasons that Save Childhood and our approach to education is so important to me, because I want parents to have the support and the information to remove their children from a situation that is not honoring their development when the time comes, if the time is right.
Mhm.
And also to change it for children. And parents can do that when they know, and educators can do it too.
Right.
So, I mean, who is this podcast for? One of the conversations that we've had. And, it's for anyone who works with or cares about children, whether you're a parent or an educator. Both of those things go hand in hand.
Right. And we can change the educational system a little at a time.
A little at a time.
And when you know better, you do better. Is that the saying?
Yes. Know better, do better.
Right. And so the word academics isn't a dirty word.
It's not a dirty word, and we are not anti-academics. We are pro-academics.
Right.
I mean, we want children to learn reading and writing and arithmetic and science and history, and we want them to know those things and to find things that they really love and become, masters of that concept or that information. We want that for children.
Right.
And we want them to have a broad and solid education, which is why we need to define academics for young children as they need to be defined to honor development.
Right.
So we're not anti-academics, but we just don't want, it's got to stop that adults, parents, and educators are so enamored by they're going to get an academically rigorous education here, or they learn all the academics, they're going to learn all their letters, and they're going to be able to read by the time they're 4 years old here. And this is what we do with the 2-year-olds. They're going to learn their flashcards, and those are all red flags.
Mhm.
And we need to all be going, whoa, wait a minute. No, I don't think so. Because when you turn away from those types of environments, you're sending a very strong message that people need to start giving children what it is they deserve to really, really soar academically. So then, we don't have to repair them later.
Right.
And you can't repair it sometimes.
Mm.
And that's such a sad loss, because it's easy to do the wrong thing. It's also easy to do the right thing,
Right.
So
we hope we've inspired you today. We hope we've inspired you today.
Yes.
With this information.
And also, some hard things to just be really bold about, speaking boldly about hard things, but our children deserve that. And so hopefully that's an encouragement as well, inspiration and encouragement to really be thinking about what these words mean in action for our children. These buzz phrases that people throw around, and we think, oh, that's all the thing. That's what we're doing now. But what we should always be doing is trusting the process of development and honoring it as children grow. And so you got to say some hard things sometimes.
Right. So that wraps it up for today's episode. Be sure to comment, share this information with people around you who want the best for children like we do, and who are passionate about saving childhood. You can follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. and new episodes drop every Tuesday morning.
Every Tuesday morning. And be sure to go to savechildhood.org and check out the 14 tenets of saving childhood. And thanks so much for listening today.
All right, we'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining us today. To learn more and join the movement, go to savechildhood.org.